Chapter 6. The Visit.
It had been weeks since Cloud surprised Aerith with the idea of being able to visit her family. The princess's spirits improved and her relationship with Cloud seemed to grow significantly.
You seem quite happy, Princess.
Aerith was sitting at her vanity combing her long locks. She was humming a tune she made up as she carefully undid the tangles in her hair. She was dressed in a white nightdress with a sheer robe around her. The wolf was watching her from across the room. Cloud could see the necklace he had given her. He liked how it looked on her. The pale green jewel suited her beautifully. The way it hung around her delicate neck, resting just above her bosom, made the prince have to turn away.
Am I just really?
Aerith tilted her head to look at him. She gave him a sweet smile before putting down her comb. She stood up and walked across the room to the ebony wolf. She sat next to him on the plush rug. The princess was accustomed to the wolf form of the prince. She found him comforting and friendly, like her pet Red 13. She treated him more like a pet, constantly petting him and snuggling against him. Cloud found the treatment rather annoying, considering he was not a wolf, but allowed it anyway. If it pleased the princess, it did not matter.
I might just return home. I miss my family.
Laying her head on his stomach, dejected, the prince simply replied,
I see.
Aerith frowned. It took a moment to realize why he sounded so distressed.
I will return with you the following day.
The princess rubbed one of his front paws absent-mindedly. The prince breathed heavily and rested his head on her hand. He enjoyed her touch and relished in it. He was not completely happy, though. Aerith could feel his uneasiness.
What troubles you?
He curled up closer to her, his head brushing against her shoulder.
I will miss you terribly, Aerith. If you were to be away from me any longer, I don't know if I can live through it. I have become very attached to you. I enjoy spending time with you.
The princess leaned forward and kissed the top of his head. Cloud blushed underneath the ebony fur. Aerith smiled and gently stroked his head in a reassuring manner.
I return. I will miss you as well.
And he moved away from the girl. The princess stared after him. She wondered if in some way she had offended him. Cloud moved towards the fireplace, his azure eyes staring at the flames.
I'd be lying if I was not reluctant to allow you to visit your family.
Aerith got up and moved towards him.
Why do you say that? I promised I would return. You have my word.
I know you will return to me.
Aerith arched an eyebrow. How was he so sure? Of course a promise was a promise, and Aerith would have returned. Yet, if that was not troubling him, then what was? Boldly, she stood next to him staring. She had to ask.
Then why are you so vacant, Cloud?
Cloud's eyes found hers. Any time he looked at her with those deep, sad orbs, Aerith could not tear her away from it. His gaze was hypnotic.
Aerith, you vowed to save your father's life to stay here with me, correct?
Aerith nodded, finding the answer to the question obvious.
As you know, I have grown fond of you.
The princess nervously nodded. What was he trying to tell her? The fire began to dim, slowly dying as it always did. Yet, now Aerith wished it did not. The gazes in Cloud's eyes were making her uneasy.
It should come to no surprise what I'm about to ask you. I want you as my bride.
Surprised nonetheless, she tore her gaze from Cloud, fleeing a little ways from him. When Aerith looked back at the prince, he was still in front of the fire, intently looking at her. She could not believe Cloud had made such a bold declaration. They had known each other for a while and had slept in the same bed, but the idea frightened the girl. No, it terrified her. She was young, and despite what she knew of the prince, she never saw him in his true form. How could she marry someone like him? He never allowed her to see his true form. Would her wedding be in a pitch black, or would he marry her in his wolf form? Both ideas were absurd.
I cannot marry you.
Frightened that he might lash out, Cloud remained silent. The light within the room became dimmer, causing Aerith to become even more frightened.
Please, understand. I am proud of you, but I cannot marry you as you are.
You will marry me as I truly am.
Hoping it would put her at ease, Aerith looked at him.
When will I see you as a man?
Cloud looked away, unwilling to answer. The princess gazed at the wolf, wanting an answer.
I cannot say yet.
He looked up at her, the fire nearly dead. He moved towards her.
I can't say. I do not want anyone but you. Please understand. I ask you because I love and cherish you. More than anything, I want you as my wife.
Aerith took a step back, but Cloud's approach was swift. Suddenly the fire went out and the room was thrown into darkness. The last thing she saw was Cloud moving towards her. When the lights went out, she felt his arm around her, holding her to him. His free hand held her from behind.
Please, trust me.
He kissed her on the lips, and Aerith closed her eyes, her body becoming weak. Had it not been for Cloud, she would have fallen to the ground. His lips pressed against her. This was her first kiss, and not a playful, friendly one, but an actual kiss. The kiss was electric. It sent shivers throughout her. She clutched onto Cloud, her fingers tightened around his shirt, and a soft moan escaped from the back of her throat. When he broke the kiss, Aerith felt her head swim. After nights of sleeping next to each other, this was the first kind of contact that was intimate in a way that Aerith could never allow him to do. Yet the prince was intrepid. Aerith took a deep breath, his scent like the forest, crisp, wild, and soothing. It was intoxicating. Cloud's hands found hers. He guided them around his neck before he picked up her weak body. His lips brushed again. The feeling was feathery, light, teasing her, or maybe unsure whether he was allowed another kiss. Aerith let out a noise before finding herself pressing her own lips to his. He laid her on his pallet, which he had discarded onto the bed when he transformed. He hovered over her before he took her right hand and laced it with his left. Aerith's mind was gone. Had something like this happened her first night, she would have fought Cloud with all her power. Now she could hardly move, and yet wanted to feel his lips on hers and hold him to her.
Aerith.
He broke apart, and Aerith slowly opened her eyes. Her left hand reached up and touched his face. She knew he would never hurt her, therefore she knew the answer.
Yes.
And Cloud slipped a ring on her finger. The next day, Aerith, per usual, found herself alone. However, waiting for her at the table was her breakfast with her favorite things. Already laid out for her was a stunning dress, and for her to wear as well as the cloak for the trip. As she ate, it was then she noticed the ring on her finger. She recalled, vaguely, Cloud putting the ring on her finger before falling asleep in the prince's arms. It was a beautiful diamond ring cut in the shape of a heart. Aerith stared at the engagement ring. She could not believe she was engaged. At first she wanted to justify it by believing she was caught up in the moment, but it was a lie. She didn't have feelings for Cloud despite not knowing what he looked like. Beside his azure eyes, it frightened her at how much she could like someone like this. Aerith walked down the main hall where she found Cloud waiting with her. He was speaking to Vincent, Tifa, and Zack. He was giving them instructions since he would be away from the castle. When Aerith reached the bottom of the staircase, Cloud averted his eyes from the servants to her. Blushing, Aerith turned away. She could hear a small chuckle coming from Tifa, and she could swear Jack would be grinning like a Cheshire cat. She moved towards them, keeping her eyes down. The three servants passed her, each one quietly giving congratulations to her. Vincent simply nodded. Tifa gave her a quick hug, and Zack nearly made her fall over with a large slap on the back he gave her. Cloud gave Zack a growl, which caused Tifa to drag Zack away by the ear.
I apologize for Zack.
As he walked up to Aerith,
That's quite alright. But it seems that everyone knows.
she slid her fingers over the ring, clutching it towards her. Cloud looked up to her.
Are you embarrassed?
No, not at all.
Cloud nodded and lowered himself to the ground.
Come. I shall take you to see your family.
Aerith climbed onto Cloud's back, sitting with her legs to the side. She gripped onto his glossy ebony fur as he stood up. Cloud let out a low howl, and the doors to the palace opened. Cloud walked out, stepping onto the bridge. Aerith looked at the morning sky only for a moment until Cloud began to move. His speed increased, and by the time he cleared the bridge, he was running at full speed. Everything seemed like a blur. Aerith had to close her eyes, her stomach lurching. She felt dizzy and feared she would fall from his back. She gripped him tighter and even lowered herself so that she was lying on him. Cloud could feel her fingers tightening around his fur. He could feel how uncomfortable she was. He wanted to slow down for her, but he needed to clear the forest. The dangers here were too immense to go any slower. When the forest ended, Cloud came to a long stretch of grass. Behind the enormous field was a large castle peeking high above the walls of the city. Cloud stopped halfway through the field.
Aerith, we have arrived.
Aerith looked up at the castle, her home. She let out a sigh of relief. She was happy to see it, but was anxious to see her mother and father again. However, when Cloud did not continue the rest of the way, Aerith began to worry, almost as if he knew. He answered her.
Forgive me, my princess. However, I cannot continue.
Aerith slipped off his back but could sense Cloud was agitated.
Is something wrong?
As I said before, I am reluctant to return you here. If I continue, I might tear you away from here and never allow you to leave my palace.
Aerith placed a comforting hand on his back. Gently she stroked his glossy fur. Cloud looked up at her, seeing her gentle smile and her eyes shining to her.
I am going to return to you. After all, I will become your wife. Someday.
The words were meant to calm Cloud, but that was not what was bothering him. Aerith wished he would just say what was wrong so she could calm him.
You should go.
Nodding his head towards the castle, Aerith turned to leave her companion when he called out to her in a low whine.
Cloud, please tell me if there is something troubling you.
Aerith, promise me you will not speak to anyone in your father's castle alone. That is my only request.
The request was strange. She could not understand why the Wolf Prince would ask something like this. Despite the oddity of it, Aerith nodded. Although she promised, he was still unsure. However, he had to be content with it. Aerith smiled, hoping it was to reassure him, but he simply looked away. He turned around, ready to leave, but before he left, he called out to her.
Meet me here tomorrow, at noon.
With that, he was gone, so fast that when Aerith went to look at him, the only thing that was there was dust and stray grass that was torn from the earth when he ran off. Aerith pulled her cloak tighter around her. She felt an undeniable pain in her, seeing Cloud so sad. She wanted to run to him and comfort him, but she would never be able to find him or catch up. Therefore, she made her way to the castle of her childhood. When Aerith entered the castle town, people instantly recognized her. The crowd was so intense that the guards came to disperse the matter. However, when they discovered the princess had returned, they instantly took her to the castle. Upon arriving at the castle, King Ghast nearly fell to the floor weeping when he saw his beloved daughter. Queen Ephalna was called from her chambers. When she saw her daughter, she gathered her in her arms, holding her like a precious treasure. King Ghast ordered a meal to be prepared in honor for her return. They spent the afternoon speaking to Princess Aerith, curious what the Wolf Prince wanted from her.
Has he harmed you in any way?
No, He has been very kind to me.
I feared he was going to devour you.
No, Cloud is very kind. Although after your last meeting with him, I'm not surprised you would think of such a thing.
Cloud. So the beast as a name?
Yes, the wolf is named Cloud. He's truly a kind person.
Person? You mean he is a human?
Yes, Father. However, he can only take his shape at night.
Such a strange prince. So, has this Prince Cloud released you? Are you allowed to return home to us?
No. I have to return to him tomorrow at noon.
Only a day with you? He stole you from us for months. And then, when he allows you to visit, gives us merely a day?
You made a deal with him. I am sure Cloud will allow me to visit again.
Aerith smiled pleasantly as she ate her lunch. She was grateful for Cloud in that he allowed her to visit. Queen Alphona studied her daughter intently. She could see the fine clothing the prince had gave her, finer fabric than in their entire kingdom. The queen also noticed the long chain around her neck and the ring on her finger. However, she kept her comments to herself. The day was a joyous day. The king, queen, princess, and everyone in the royal court talked and celebrated late into the night. When she grew tired, Sung led Aerith to her bedchamber. Aerith took his elbows as he escorted her.
It's wonderful to see you again, my princess.
It's wonderful to see you as well. Mother and Father were very happy. How are they since I've been gone?
They miss you terribly. In truth, the palace has not been the same since you have left. Are you happy with the wolf?
Aerith smiled, not at all aware of the hint of jealousy in his words. However, she was concerned that he was not the only one with her. She remembered Cloud's request.
I am very happy. He treats me well.
The two of them stepped in the front of her room. Sung slipped away and bowed gracefully to her.
As long as you are well, then I'm content. Good night, Princess Aerith.
When Sung left her, she smiled. She opened the door to her bedchambers and found everything exactly as she left it. She stepped inside, finding a small fire already waiting for her. Yet a pair of eyes watched her from behind, staring at her intently. Then it charged at her, its feet thumping wildly across the ground. Aerith spun around and let out a scare. Before the creature pounced on her, landing on the ground as the beast began licking her face and began pushing the fire creature off her.
Wiffertine, stop! I miss you too.
Red 13 rubbed his head against hers, clearly missing his mistress. She hugged him and gave him several kisses on the head. She had missed her faithful pet and could tell he missed her.
Red 13 seems in good spirits.
Aerith looked behind her, seeing her mother. She closed the door to Aerith's bedroom and looked at her daughter suspiciously.
Is something wrong with her?
No, I just came to see my beautiful daughter.
Aerith smiled. Alphona studied her daughter, who was continuously rubbing her pet on the back.
You seem to be well taken care of. The wolf, Cloud, and you seem close.
Close?
Yes, indeed. You even call him by his name, not his highness or his title.
I suppose we have become close.
Aerith absent-mindedly as she hugged Red 13.
I see he has showered you with such fine gifts. Why is that, my dear?
Aerith looked at her mother questionably. She was technically alone with her mother, but she suddenly became quite alarmed by her mother's questions.
Trinkets.
She was trying to brush the necklace and especially the ring off. Her mother moved closer, an eyebrow arched. Aerith stood up. Red 13 curled up against her.
Trinkets.
All of a sudden, her mother snatched her left hand. Aerith gasped as her mother examined the ring on her finger. Aerith tried to tug her hand away, but her mother was firm. When her mother was done, she let go of her daughter's hand.
Do not lie to your mother. That beast is smitten with you.
He is not always a wolf. He is human.
Ah, I see. Then he must be quite handsome if you are so readily engaged to him. Tell me, what does he look like?
Aerith licked her lips. She could not very well tell her mother how Cloud looked like because she did not have the faintest idea what he looked like. She only knew he had the most spectacular eyes she had ever seen.
I don't know.
What? How could you not know what your future husband looks like?
Aerith shook her head, not having a plausible answer for either.
Oh, for God's sake! Aerith, that creature could very well be the ugliest man in the world. How could he be deceiving you as we speak? He gives you beautiful things and only takes the shape of a man when you cannot see. He is quite possibly a monster.
But Mother, Cloud loves me.
Oh, no doubt he is smitten with how beautiful you are, that he is ashamed. He knows once you are married to him, he can show you how ugly he is, but it will be too late.
But his eyes are so beautiful.
Even the ugliest creature could have pretty eyes, but it does not make them beautiful.
The queen grasped onto the mantle of the fireplace for support. Aerith looked hurt, staring down at the ring on her finger.
Believe it, you are marrying a monster.
Aerith shook her head and tried reasoning with her mother that Cloud could not be deceiving her. He loved her.
Perhaps he has a reason that he cannot show himself to me.
Afalna ignored her.
If he truly cares, he will show himself to you.
And if he doesn't?
The queen turned around and held out a small orb to her.
It is fire materia. Use this when the wolf falls asleep to see his face.
Her mother pressed the orb in her hand. Aerith wanted to protest, but her mother was already leaving the room in haste. The princess slumped to the floor. Red 13 looked up at her, sensing her trouble. Aerith stared at the orb. She wanted to believe Cloud, but the seeds of doubt were planted deep. She closed her hands around the orb and held her head in her hand. Red 13 rested his hand on her knee, trying to offer her comfort, but the princess was confused. She was utterly confused on whom to believe. Should she believe her mother, listen to Cloud, or above all, her own heart?